War comics is a genre of comic books that gained popularity in English-speaking countries following World War II. History: American war comics. Shortly after the birth of the modern comic book in the mid to late 1930s, comics publishers began including stories of wartime adventures in the multi-genre omnibus titles then popular as a format. Even prior to the U.S. involvement in World War II, comic books such as Captain America Comics #1 depicted superheroes fighting Adolf Hitler and the Nazis. Golden Age publisher Quality Comics debuted its title Black Hawk in 1944. The title was published more or less continuously until the mid-1980s. In the post-World War II era, comic books devoted solely to war stories began appearing, and gained popularity in the United States and Canada through the 1950s and even during the Vietnam War. The titles tended to concentrate on U.S. military depictions, generally in World War II, the Korean War or the Vietnam War. Most publishers produced anthologies. Industry giant DC Comics war comics included such long-running titles as All American Men of War, Our Army at War, Our Fighting Forces, and Star-Spangled War Stories. Another prolific publisher of war comics was Charlton Comics, which produced a wide variety of titles beginning in the 1950s, such as Battlefield Action, Fighting Army, and Fighting Marines. Quality also began publishing GI Combat during this era. Marvel Comics also produced war titles, notably Sergeant Fury and His Howling Commandos. In contrast to the typical glamorizing approach of most war titles, the EC Comics titles Frontline Combat and Two-Fisted Tales depicted the horrors of war realistically and in great detail, exposing what editor Harvey Kurtzman saw as the truth about war without idealizing it. Around 1959, several recurring characters began to appear in mainstream comic lines, including Sergeant Rock and the Haunted Tank in the DC line. These recurring characters began as regular guests of anthology titles such as Our Army at War and later graduated to their own titles. End of the Silver Age. By the late 1980s, a great number of venerable war titles from the late 1950s and 1960s, Silver Age of comic books, died out. War comics series that ended long runs in the 1980s, following publication of over 100 issues, include Black Hawk, Fighting Army, Fighting Marines, GI Combat, Our Fighting Forces, Sergeant Fury and His Howling Commandos, Sergeant Rock, Unknown Soldier, Weird War Tales. New titles were still appearing, however, notable among these being Marvel's Vietnam, which debuted in 1987 and was based during the first year on writer Doug Murray's actual Vietnam experiences. Murray was surprised that his proposal for a Vietnam War-themed comic was accepted during this period. I never expected anything to come of it because war books were already pretty much dead at that point in 1985. Another notable war comic focused on Vietnam was Don Lomax's Vietnam Journal, published by Apple Comics from 1987 to 1991. Also from Marvel in the 1980s was the Toy Tie and G.I. Joe, a real American hero which focused on a fictional counter-terrorist team in a contemporary setting, and a limited run of Tales of the Marine Corps, similar in tone and style to Charlton's Fighting line of war anthologies. British war comics black and white anthology stories were popular in Britain in the 1960s and early 1970s. Examples include Commando Comics and Battle Picture Weekly. There were also weekly comics that consisted of a variety of mainly war story series, such as The Victor, Warlord, and Battle reprints. Trade paperback reprint collections of war comics include Black Hawk Archives Volume 1, Enemy Ace Archives Volume 1, Enemy Ace Archives Volume 2, The Losers by Jack Kirby, Marvel Masterworks Sergeant Fury Volume 1, Marvel Masterworks Sergeant Fury Volume 2. Sergeant Rock Archives Volume 1. Sergeant Rock Archives Volume 2. Sergeant Rock Archives Volume 3. Showcase presents Blackheart Volume 1. Showcase presents Enemy Ace Volume 1. Showcase presents The Haunted Tank Volume 1. Showcase presents The Haunted Tank Volume 2. Showcase presents Sergeant Rock Volume 1. Showcase presents Sergeant Rock Volume 2. Showcase presents The Unknown Soldier Volume 1. Showcase presents The War That Time Forgot Volume 1.